Dinosaur, written by Stephen Llewelyn and performed by Chris Barrie. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell to keep up to date with the latest installments.
Chapter 2: Disaster. Almost a day after launch, the engineering team had largely settled into their routines with the stresses of preparing the ship and taking off behind them. In between takeoff, the wormhole jump, and landing, they usually hoped for long periods of low excitement. On this occasion, one of them remained on edge. There were 4 engineers aboard the New World, headed by Chief Engineer Lieutenant Hiro Nasaki. Sensing movement out of the corner of his eye, he looked up from his console momentarily, just in time to see his second-in-command slip away, looking almost shifty. Hiro shook his head. Tokyo born and bred, he would be the first to admit that, although he could get by in Japanese and English, he only really spoke machine fluently. Indeed, he could compel the most sophisticated shuttlecraft to handshake electronically with a lowly toaster. But people, they were just so unknowable. Technically, Hiro's shift had ended a couple of hours ago, but the position he held was no mere job to the chief. He knew he was a first-rate engineer and wore his love affair for the New World on his sleeve, but until recently had never considered people skills particularly important. A deficit which placed him at a disadvantage when recruiting his engineering team a few years ago after a reshuffle. It was the primary reason he had ended up with the second-in-command nobody else in the fleet wanted. Despite his blind spot where people were concerned, Hiro was not an unkind man, and often stewed over just what to do with Lieutenant Jeff Lloyd. He had tried to befriend him several times, but it had never gone well. Lloyd had a reputation among the crew for being embittered and almost wholly unlikable, but Hiro simply saw him as an imposition. Yet he seemed to be stuck in this binary struggle with the man. He knew Captain Douglas would offer support if he needed it, but asking would feel like failure somehow. He sighed, staring at the door through which the impossible man had made his exit a moment ago. "What's he up to?" he muttered to himself. It was times like this he wished his father was still alive. He always knew how to handle people. He lapsed into thought. Lloyd has been passed over for advancement several times, even since I was promoted chief engineer, and quite rightly so in my opinion. Could that be his problem? Jealousy? Conversely, Hiro's relationship with the other engineers, crewmen Giorgio and Mario Bacchini, was quite different. The young twins from Pompeii were almost identical, which led to occasional misunderstandings, but crucially, they got Lieutenant Nasaki's hands-on way of working. Being roughly of an age, the 3 fostered a healthy competitiveness, which Hiro encouraged. His experience was not exhaustive, but he found that it made for an efficient department, despite Old Man Lloyd dropping the occasional spanner in the works. However, just lately, Lloyd had seemed even more irascible than usual. As a man who only ever dreamed of being an engineer, Hiro did not always understand the desires of others. All he knew for sure was that his overtures of friendship had continually failed. Forced to admit that making friends was perhaps not really his forte, he had recently decided to try stealth, something about which he knew even less. In his innocence, it never occurred to him that, when dealing with human beings, small acts can have cumulative consequences, and by issuing Lloyd with tasks all over the ship, always carefully away from his own theatre of works, he was compounding a fracture which far transcended a mere generational gap. Second Engineer Jeff Lloyd made his way along the corridor on a personal errand, heading away from engineering for now. He was both anxious about something new and annoyed about something old. As he stopped by his locker, hoping to retrieve his precision socket set, his annoyance dialed up another notch. Gasping in frustration, he balled his fists. "Those damn kids have been taking my tools again! How the hell do they always break my encryptions? he exploded, violently slamming the locker door. "Second engineer!" he spat angrily to himself. "I should be in charge of this ship. At very least, chief engineer. Instead, I have to play subordinate to a kid who still has wet ink on his diplomas. As for the others, I know more about the ship, leadership, and hardship than all of them put together, including that damn Scotsman who's 3 years my junior. Nearly 30 years as a lieutenant. 30 damn years! I've put everything into this job. It even cost me my relationship with Audrey, and none of it was my fault. I could have been married and happy if it wasn't for the benighted nepotism within NASA. I could have... His rant ended abruptly, his rage honing to a cutting edge. It's time I made a change. Time I taught these people a lesson, he brooded silently. And today's as good a day as any. Crewmen Giorgio and Mario Bacchini ran advanced system checks on the wormhole drive. It wouldn't be needed until tomorrow, but Mario, whose responsibility it was, liked to run tests well in advance, so that any problems could be flagged up and fixed before the captain ordered a jump. Today was important to the brothers. This would be the last trip the new world would make to Mars for a while, and still they considered their options with no decision in sight. They could stay on for the moon mission or look to ply their talents elsewhere. Unwilling to be parted, they were equally unwilling to agree about it.
Hey Mario, if we don't decide soon, we're just going to have to stay here and that's all there is to it,
stated Giorgio in English. The Bacchinis often conversed in English even when alone to improve their skills.
Yeah, replied Mario. I think about it later. Of more immediate concern, did you return Jeff's socket set?
Giorgio's brows knitted.
Oops, he muttered.
Ha! He'll go pazzo, laughed Mario.
Jeff Lloyd dampens my bonhomie not at all, replied Giorgio snootily. Besides, he won't know if you don't tell him. I forgot about it. It's no big deal. I'd put it back if I were you. I thought he was going to have a seizure the last time you borrowed something from him without asking.
But he always says no, said Giorgio with frustration.
Well, I'm just saying.
Mario sniggered at the silly situation Giorgio had gotten himself into. It was commonplace for one or other of the twins to be in Lloyd's bad books. They were that sort, and so was he.
He always blames me, continued Giorgio plaintively.
It always is you, bit back Mario.
What? Why don't you remind me about the time you put his dirty laundry in the air vent next to his workstation?
Hey, it stank, man.
So what? You thought a couple of days of having warm air passed over it would help? He located them, eventually. He went loco, you mean? I thought he was going to see the captain for sure that time. I'm positive he would have too, if he'd known which of us did it. But don't worry, fratello. I would have helped you pack your belongings, maybe even played a few sad songs before waving you off, that type of thing.
Hey! Giorgio cried out as an empty food carton whizzed overhead.
I thought you never allowed food around the wormhole drive.
Mario looked scandalized.
You brought that in here.
Me?
You! Look, Georgie, I'm going to go to the captain if you keep leaving your crap in my workspace, okay? He'll kick you off the ship and you'll have to go back to correcting that plodding thesis you slapped together on temporal mechanics.
Giorgio blustered for a moment.
Plodding? It was more widely regarded than that derivative work you hashed up about wormholes. Hey, and what do you mean by correcting?
Derivative? Sputtered Mario.
My thesis got us our jobs. Oh, please, Giorgio replied witheringly. You press a few buttons here and there, give the drive housing a bit of a polish in between jumps, and drink filthy NASA coffee. I'm surprised you haven't shined the casing away.
Mario laughed at his brother's insults despite himself.
Mary the janitor could do your job,
continued Giorgio, laughing himself now.
In between cleaning the refectory and making drinks for all the crew. I do all the real work with Hero. And FYI, that food carton was yours. I saw you walk past the bin with it on the way here, in one of your little fetishist daydreams, probably.
Seeing his moment, Giorgio launched it back across the room. Mario went down.
Mario?
A pained voice came from the floor behind a workstation.
You got me in the plums, idiota!
Late that night, the hatch leading into the wormhole drive section of engineering slid open. The doors made very little noise, and the man stepped inside equally quietly. The whole engineering deck was deserted, its crew either on a rest cycle or running systems checks elsewhere on the ship. Subsequently, the wormhole drive was also left unattended. The man checked the system's status. All of Bacini's diagnostics seemed to have been completed with no faults logged. Good, thought the saboteur. Even the fastidious Mario is unlikely to check on his beloved wormhole drive again until it powers down after the jump. He opened the drive casing and planted the device he had constructed, knowing exactly where to place it for effect. Once satisfied, he closed the housing and left. He knew the device was much more powerful than it needed to be, but he had been afraid of being caught with it. He did not like handling it either. Sweat ran down his face and neck. "Sod it. It'll do. Now get a grip," he told himself, wiping his brow with a sleeve. He had everything worked out, escape and all. It was risky, but if timed accurately, he would make Earth orbit within 3 days, carrying the sad news of a disaster. Lifeboat 7 would be slower than the New World and more cramped, but he was being paid a lot of money, so these were small matters. He paused to look carefully around a corner, having already confused the surveillance system in this area. However, you could never fully factor for passers-by. Content the coast was clear, he propped up his justifications and vacated the area, silencing his conscience as he tried to regulate his breathing. The USS New World was now a day and a half out from Earth, and on a heading straight for Mars. Her crew busied themselves, preparing to make their jump through a wormhole. Due to the relative infancy of the technology, the stipulated minimum distance of 1,800,000 kilometers was an agreed safety margin. Few of the scientists involved with its development could agree with any surety what gravitic effects a planetary body might have on a forming wormhole. Captain Douglas gave the passengers his usual 30-minute warning, asking them to make their way back to the embarkation area, a multifunctional space and in some ways the heart of the pod. At any time it could be an auditorium for shows, lectures or gatherings, but most importantly, with over 100 secure tiered seats, it made an ideal passenger seating platform while the ship underwent maneuvers. Passengers entered in small groups, taking their seats over the next 20 minutes or so. The atmosphere was electric, and naturally, excited chatter made everyone louder than everyone else. Apart from the new life on the new world which awaited them, this would also be their first wormhole jump. Within minutes of taking his seat, Tim Norris became fast friends with a 4-legged passenger named Reva, a beautiful long-haired border collie who happened to own a human called Dr. Natalie Pearson. Natalie was a young zoologist, consulting for the team of geneticists who would one day make Mars home for Terran invertebrates and eventually larger animals. Tim and Natalie rattled away happily, lost in the wondrous story of life on Earth, with occasional interruptions for attention from Reva. Tim stroked the collie's head. Dogs always know an animal lover, and the border collie had latched onto him at once amongst so many. At that moment, Reva hooked a paw over the top of the expanded screen on Tim's personal comm and pulled it down. It was stealing his attention. "Reaver! Reaver! No, boy!" said Natalie. That did it. His mistress was ignoring him too now, in favour of this glowing thing that made strange noises. He slapped his paw down harder, speaking an indignant, husky, "Reaver, sit down," Natalie snapped crossly. The collie's ears flattened to his head. Whoops! He may have gone too far. He tilted his head to one side and laid it on Natalie's lap, staring up at her with a look of innocence so timeless that it may have predated Eve's apple. Tim burst out laughing. Play. Branches rustle and swish, a whiplash making it all but impossible to see ahead. Just outside the forest canopy, bellows of fear and anger cross the plain. The sudden daylight is dazzling, and the ground 4 meters below begins to move by much more quickly. It is time to run. It is time to hunt. The approach makes the reek of fear in the air almost tangible as the Maposaurus pack close, jostling and shoving one another, claws grasping in excitement. From the center of the charge, nothing can be seen but the flexing of powerful hind legs and angry tails through the dust. Surrounded by 14 killers, some as large as Tyrannosaurus rex, the view of the quarry is almost non-existent. After a 200-meter sprint, the enormous, plodding Argentinosaurus herd cast panicked shadows over the hunting pride. The Maposaurs scatter, tearing between their prey, separating them and attacking opportunistically until a victim is singled out. From their relatively small heads to the ends of their massive tails, the oldest Argentinosaurs are easily 40 meters long, their giant necks contributing almost half that length. At 80 tons or more, even the largest of the Maposaurs give them a wide berth, instinct and experience telling them that a strike from those 12-meter-long tails weighing as much as 20 tons would be devastating. The technique, honed over millennia, is to separate the young or infirm before focusing their efforts, and sure enough, the Maposaurs soon split an adolescent from the herd. The terrified creature whips its tail and rises up on its hind legs to stamp at the hunters as they come near. Even this smaller quarry is 10 meters long and weighing around 15 tons can kill by clumsy, terrified flailing alone. Undaunted, the hunters attack from several directions, hit and fade, hit and fade. The terrible serrated teeth of the Maposaurs slice the flesh of their prey, causing wickedly jagged lacerations. They cannot kill such a giant animal outright, but know that it will eventually succumb to blood loss and shock. Soon this huge and magnificent force of nature will be carrion, food for the pack and those who will follow down the chain. Fear goes to work, weakening the creature still further as it falls onto its front knees, crying mournfully for help, for a mother it has never known to save it from this horrific fate. The largest of the Argentinosaurs are unaffected either by its plight or the general chaos around them. So vast that fear is a forgotten memory, these ground-shaking sauropod dinosaurs simply continue their business of felling trees and stripping the branches of their bounty. Suddenly, having all the time in the world, the Maposaurs focus their attention on the weakening sub-adult. They run around the terrified creature, hind legs pumping, tails keeping them balanced through every tight turn and instinctively choreographed maneuver. One adventurous adolescent is so caught up in the excitement of the hunt that he fails to notice the shadow which falls across him, and the force of the tail whip smashes his 1-ton body instantly. The youth lands 10 meters from where he was struck, a pulped slab of soggy flesh and shattered bone. Before the motion of this deadly game of bat and ball is fully spent, or the young life even fully extinguished, a giant Maposaurus bull picks up the broken remains in its jaws and slopes off to feast on his own, in peace. The flicks of his tail an earnest warning to any who would barter for a share. The shadow over the pack's chosen prey grows as a second mid-sized Argentinosaurus cow swings her tail threateningly in the path of the hunters. Despite losing a lot of blood, the injuries are not fatal, and the wounded sauropod gets back to its feet, hiding among the females who instinctually answered its call. None of the individuals are its mother. It is simply understood that they all are. Slowly the giants return to the herd as a new battle commences over the corpse of the dead Maposaurus. For a pack this size, it is merely a snack. But the giant herbivores can never outpace their predators, so there will always be tomorrow. The lucky Argentinosaurus takes one last look behind at the squabbling carnivores as it limps away. Pause.
You made that film yourself?
Natalie asked breathlessly, clearly moved by the young dinosaur's plight.
Yes,
Tim answered, hoping his pride was not too obvious.
It was a project for traditional animation class. You don't think some of the subtitles were a bit much?
No way. I hope you got an A. It's awesome. I actually felt like I was running with the pack at one point. Tim cringed awkwardly.
Thanks, I played it to the guys last night in the bar, and they asked me that.
Well, when I say they, I mean Hank and Woodsy's dad.
Woodsy said that baby dinosaurs weren't the kind of naked chicks he was into.
Natalie laughed until Tim confessed.
Actually, I got a B.
You're kidding. Natalie was genuinely surprised after watching such a lifelike video.
How did your teacher justify that? Well, I decided to create a movie showing an attack on a herd of Argentinosaurus by a pack of Maposaurus, as you saw, but the assignment technically called for a short film showing the preparation or cooking of a meal. I got bored. I got sidetracked. I got a B. Of course, I argued that this was exactly what my film did portray, if you needed a meal in the time of the dinosaurs anyway. But despite my best arguments, Cretaceous Cookery just didn't go over very well with my teacher. Still, I didn't mind really. He smiled ruefully. My classmates did some quite difficult work, making virtual pastries rise and such, but guess whose film everybody wanted to see again?
Natalie grinned at the young man.
I'm not surprised. I was almost in tears at one point. I would never have forgiven you if the young sauropod had died.
Reva whined. He scented a change in the crowd's mood and, feeling left out, jumped onto the arm of the seat between them, shoving his nose into Tim's face whilst losing traction with his hind legs and sliding back, gracelessly, into Natalie's lap. Flailing to stop him from falling, she was rewarded with a lick which covered her nose and left eye as Reva settled into a cradled, upside-down position across her chest. All she could smell was her beloved pet's last meal. It could have been worse, a lot worse. Panting happily, the collie was indifferent while everyone else stopped whatever they were doing to listen, as a second announcement from the bridge echoed around the cavernous space. Creating a stable wormhole in T-2 minutes. The captain's voice boomed over the public address system. Previous journeys had demonstrated that the volume at this stage needed to be dialed higher than usual to compensate for the natural excitement among the passengers. We will follow the wormhole exiting 1.8 million kilometers from Mars. Please make sure all luggage is secure and all safety harnesses are fastened. Captain, out. Most of the passengers' belongings had been long secured in their quarters, but there was still a shuffle as everyone gave bags and belts one last check. The captain's voice soon sounded again, unnaturally loud this time, as the passengers fell into silent anticipation. We're about to jump and will arrive near Mars straight away. There will be no perception of time for us in the wormhole. Please remain seated and calm. The official part of his message relayed, he continued with more of his natural warmth. We've done this many times and there's nothing to fear. We'll be back in real space before you know it. Douglas, out. The tiered seats of embarkation faced a large curved screen, some 16 meters wide by 9 high. When it lit up to show the view from a camera set into the nose of the ship, an audible gasp travelled around the auditorium. Mars, their destination, could be seen in the centre of the display as a slightly reddish dot among the heavens.
Dinosaur, written by Stephen Llewelyn and performed by Chris Barrie. New installments uploaded each week. Subscribe for more. Visit the link in the description for free New World companion stories, available for download as ebooks.